Good morning to you. This is Sunrise. Top stories today. The government accused of taking Donald Trump's instructions on Syria. Jeremy Corbyn criticises Theresa May's approach, saying military involvement risks making things worse. It comes after France claimed to have proof that Syria conducted the attack and a promise from Russia to defend itself.
Russia will protect its people on the ground. This is obvious, which is this is the task for each and every country in the world, to protect its citizens on the ground.
Well, does the use of chemical weapons mean the UK should get involved? That's our talking point at 9:30. Also today, hundreds protest outside a Liverpool hospital where doctors are to switch off the life support of a terminally ill toddler. By having just one more alcoholic drink a day than you should might be shortening your life. Copycat gorilla, the primate who follows his trainer's every move. In the sport, Arsenal survive a scare in Moscow to advance to the last four of the Europa League. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. Our main news is that Jeremy Corbyn has accused the government of waiting for instructions from Donald Trump on how to respond to the suspected chemical weapons attack in Syria. He's insisting that MPs are given a vote on any attack on President Assad's regime and that ultimately there should be a UN-led investigation into that attack. Well, let's go to Westminster and talk to our political correspondent, Laura Bundock. So, where does this leave the Prime Minister, Laura, in terms of what action she may decide to take?
Well, she's in quite a difficult position, and without doubt, there is a growing pressure on her regarding this issue as to whether or not MPs get a say on what kind of action, if any action, in fact, should be taken against Syria. I think for now, the Prime Minister will be content that she's got the backing of Cabinet. At that emergency meeting yesterday, they all agreed that it was highly likely that President Assad was behind the attack, that it could not go unchallenged, and that any further chemical attack should be deterred, and that the UK would work alongside the US and France. We didn't get any detail about the form of the action and any idea of when it might happen, and the timescale really is critical here, because at the moment MPs are on holiday, but when recess ends, when they come back on Monday, if action hasn't been taken by then I think there will be a growing pressure on Theresa May, and certainly Jeremy Corbyn's statement today is ramping that up slightly, taking it up a notch. Here's what he said. He said the government appears to be waiting for instructions from President Donald Trump on how to proceed, but the US administration is giving alarmingly contradictory signals. Ministers should take their proposals such as they are to Parliament, and Britain should press for an independent UN-led investigation of last week's horrific chemical weapons attack so that those responsible can be held to account. Now, I think he's certainly right in that Britain is waiting for instruction from Donald Trump, and it certainly will be the US which determines the timescale of all of this. But the issue as to whether or not to take action and what kind of action is one that just continues to divide and to split opinions. And there are certainly those who believe, yes, the Prime Minister has the mandate. She doesn't have to go to Parliament. It would be wrong for her to do so, including the Conservative MP Johnny Mercer, who sits on the Defence Committee as well. Here's what he had to say a little earlier today.
You will get a lot of intelligence that is not in the public domain, will not be made clear to members of Parliament, and rightly so, because it will burn assets that we can't use again and make this country less safe. But the Prime Minister and the National Security Council, they see all of that and they make the decision. And we're a democracy, we elect them, we elect the Prime Minister, and they make that decision. Now, should we, of course, have a debate about that with the Prime Minister in Parliament? Parliament is fundamentally important in this. MPs absolutely must have their say, but the idea that that is binding and the Prime Minister then has her freedom of movement limited by not going to Parliament, I think is not good for the country, and it's not the right thing to do.
Of course, there are many MPs, including some within Theresa May's own party, who want the opportunity not just for a debate, but a vote as well. They want the chance to hear the evidence. They want to debate issues like how this could impact the situation with Russia, how we could avoid conflict with Russia. And they also say the debate and vote would be important for uniting not just MPs, but the country behind any potential action. I think a vote is something Theresa May would certainly be keen to avoid with her very slim working majority. But as time passes, this will be a lot harder for her, I think.
OK, Laura, thank you. Well, let's talk to our defence correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's here. And in terms of the timings of all of this, where do we stand? Because we've been told, obviously, we seem to think that an attack is imminent. Does it actually matter if, in terms of the logistics as to whether something should happen this weekend or at some point into next week?
Not necessarily, no. I think some people might feel that you're losing the element of surprise and you're losing momentum. I don't think that would be the right approach. And this is why. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Syrians are moving their hardware, such as their jets, either possibly into Iran or into the Russian base at Latakia to sort of have that Russian protection, if you like, because they don't believe the Allies will bomb that base. But if you're going to attack airfields, as long as you do a good enough job of destroying runways, destroying fuel depots, ammunition dumps, command and control centres, etc. It doesn't matter where you put the planes. If they can't now take off from the airfields around Syria, then you've kind of done your job. Secondly, if Donald Trump was acting unilaterally like he did last year, he could probably go ahead and do this far quicker. But when you try and build a coalition, as he's doing, which is at least 3 countries strong, possibly 4 or 5, even more if you include Saudi Arabia and Qatar, it takes a lot longer for the political process, the domestic political processes to work their way through and for everybody to get themselves in position. Talking of getting into position, you need to get your military assets into position. And lastly, it's not necessarily just airstrikes. If they're putting together a wider package, which includes sanctions, for example, that also takes time to work through so you can sort of present it to the world as one big effort.
And in terms of what the resources Britain has to put into something like this, should it happen, I mean, presumably they are actually quite limited. A small number of planes and probably not a huge amount more.
Well, the British effort could be threefold. Firstly, you've got the strike effort, the airstrike effort, which would be 8 tornadoes, 6 typhoons currently at RAF Akrotiri, already flying missions against Islamic State. So they could contribute in the air. You've then got naval assets, in particular a submarine that's in the area, a Stuart-class submarine in the area that could fire Tomahawk missiles. And thirdly, and I hate to sort of underplay the importance of this, but it often gets overlooked, it's things like air-to-air refuelling and surveillance aircraft that are hugely important behind the scenes in a campaign, particularly a campaign that lasts more than just one night, for example. So there is a lot that Britain can bring to play, plus as well cyber intelligence if they're looking to try and take down air defences or try and hack in and attack President Assad using cyber capabilities. Well, that brings into play GCHQ and others. So there is a lot that Britain can bring to the table.
OK, Alistair, for now, thank you.
Rise up against President Assad, one of the last to cave in after the alleged chemical weapons attack on Saturday night. The Russian news bulletins full with these scenes of jubilation. The story in Russia that the chemical attack was fake and Duma now freed from the terrorists. A point repeated by the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova in an exclusive interview with Sky News.
We are 100% sure that that was a clear provocation. For example, white helmets, we are absolutely sure were involved in this provocation.
Russia's brokered this evacuation deal, shipping the remaining rebels out and their families and sending in Russian military police units, most of them from the northern Caucasus, useful foot soldiers for the cleanup. Russia's promising to keep the OPCW weapons inspectors safe when they get here, but will they find anything, or will anything be left? In Salisbury, a very different setting for a very different style of attack. But the OPCW inspectors here have confirmed the British government's Novichok findings, and Russia says it's not convinced.
We want to know what happened and why we're refused of providing us this information. If you are accusing a whole state in doing such things, you should give any sort, of playing cards. You should put some cards on the table.
Syria hasn't cost Russia all that much to date in terms of blood and treasure, and it's gained hugely in regional influence. But it's mindful that a misstep now could change all that in the powder keg that is the Syrian conflict. In an atmosphere where trust and diplomatic decorum are in short supply.
I was a bit surprised that such strong messages are sent through social networks, because this is actually the matter and the case to take a phone and to call your partners all over the world. And
do you think it's rude?
Rude?
Yeah.
Do you still think that this word is existing in our world? I really doubt.
As Russia moves military vehicles into Duma, it is moving troops elsewhere out of harm's way. But Russia's servicemen are deeply embedded with Syrian ground forces. Targeting will have to be very precise indeed if it is to deter President Assad whilst avoiding wider conflagration with President Putin. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Moscow.
No, I don't know. It's just a hot mess at the moment. Well, I'd be very anxious about any kind of military intervention. What would it actually achieve?
I really disagree with military action against anything happening in Syria. There's already enough fighting going on there as it is, and there's a real danger of war escalating way beyond what we expect.
If it's narrow and well targeted, could send an important signal. If it's pushed up, no, it's a bad signal.
Military intervention never helps anything. I think we have that empire attitude where these countries have these problems, have these civil wars, and we try and go in and fix it. When we had our civil war, when the Americans had their civil war, nobody went and bombed us, and we got this society we have now. They need to go through this on their own.
The last time Britain was considering getting involved in Syria, there was a debate in Parliament, and Parliament voted against it. That was very bad news for the then Prime Minister Cameron. But the idea that we should be getting involved in wars in the Middle East without Parliament being able to debate the issue and make a decision is absolutely outrageous. And I think it's because she knows there is very little public support for us getting involved in the Middle East again. We all remember, everyone in Britain remembers, we were lied to by our government and the American government when we were told that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. The result was hundreds of thousands, I think nearly 1 million dead. Many of our own troops lost their lives as well, and it all turned out to be based on a lie.
You would agree with me, if we embraced the regime change in other nations, we can hardly say, but this is something that only the U.S. gets to do. If we say that's an acceptable foreign policy goal for us, other nations conclude it's an acceptable foreign policy goal for them.
This is a unique, exceptional country. Russia is unique, but not exceptional.
Regime change was discussed at Mike Pompeo's confirmation hearing for the position of Secretary of State. And he also said that soft policy on Russia will end once he becomes Secretary of State. But it's not clear what this soft policy is exactly, considering Trump's tweets and recent sanctions imposed on Moscow just last week. And Pompeo seems to be proud of this, saying that the U.S. has expelled the most diplomats at any time since the Cold War. And he also said that he would make sure that the administration continues this policy.
I take a backseat to no one with my views of the threat that is presented to America from Russia. And if I am confirmed as the Secretary of State, I can assure you this administration will continue, as it has for the past 15 months, to take real actions to push back, to reset the deterrence relationship with respect to Russia.
That same line that we're hearing from Pompeo, we've been hearing from American leaders. This is nothing new. Madeleine Albright was Secretary of State. She said that if we use force, it's because we're the United States. We're the indispensable nation. You had Obama talking about us being the indispensable nation, Hillary Clinton. So this is really the air that Americans breathe. We're now in a multipolar world. The United States and Russia still have a couple thousand nuclear weapons pointed at each other on hair-trigger alert. China's economy is booming. This is no longer the world of the early 1990s. Now Putin is standing up and asserting Russia's national security interests. And there are some people in the United States who just don't like that.